the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
See if Lane Kiffin can prove that. They did well in the portal again. Let's just see. Let me see Lane Kiffin getting the SEC title game with Ole Miss. And it's not a Lane Kiffin thing. Lane Kiffin's awesome. I'm pro Lane Kiffin. It's more of an Ole Miss in the history of Ole Miss thing. Like, I understand the back-to-back double-digit win seasons, but I need to see Ole Miss make that final leap as a program before I can throw them in with the Bamas, the Texases, and the Georgias. Of those three, though, Matt Green, who do you think is the most likely not to live up to the hype going into this year? Bama, Texas, or Georgia?
That's a good question, because obviously the recruiting that Alabama's doing right now, this is not stuff that's going to impact the 2024 team, but I feel like it's giving Kalen DeBoer and people confidence in the administration, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Alabama, I don't know. I guess I just kind of have confidence that an offensive guy like Kalen DeBoer is going to kind of get the best out of Jalen Milroe, because I think Jalen Milroe is kind of a flawed quarterback, but he's also a very dynamic quarterback. And if you can design a really dynamic offense with his abilities, maybe hiding his shortcomings. And I think Kalen DeBoer is a guy who can potentially do that. So it's hard for me to say Alabama's going to disappoint. Part of me wants to say Texas, because it is the first year in the SEC, but I think they might be that good right now. So I don't know. Of those three, I'm definitely not going to say Georgia. I think Georgia is just complete on both sides, and they should be, one of the contenders at the end of the season, even though they do have to go on the road at Texas and at Alabama. But if I'm picking between those three, I guess I would say Alabama.
That's interesting. I wouldn't pick Alabama. I think it's Texas.
Who are you picking?
I think I'm kind of worried about Texas at this point now, where you could see the weird stuff that could happen if Quin can't stay healthy again. I'm curious, what happens, the horns down. It's happening. That Texas is going to be faced with some adversity here. I think them talking about being everybody's Super Bowl and stuff like that, I don't know. I think Texas, like I've said, I've been very pro Texas in this program for the last few years. I think Steve Sarkisian is a good coach. I think they're moving in the right direction. They made the playoff. They deserve a lot of credit for getting over the hump. I'm a little concerned about just this. Let's pencil in Texas to go back to back and make it to the CFP again. And they've penciled in the date between the Dogs and the Longhorns. I think Texas is pushing to get to what Kirby's built in the next 2 to 3 years. I think they're knocking on the door to being at that level, recruiting wise, portal wise, wins wise. They're close to what Georgia is. But I'm just kind of nervous about what it's going to look like for Texas. And if they get upset early, or I don't know. I'm just very curious what happens with this program if they get knocked in the mouth early in the SEC. Do they come together as a team of we're going to be okay, we're built for this league, we belong here? Or does it go the opposite way? There was finger pointing, or it's this team might unravel because of just the amount of pressure that is on Texas to be the class of the SEC with Georgia before even playing an SEC game. I'm very curious how they handled that. Remember, they lost to Oklahoma last year. They didn't even everyone's worried about Oklahoma in the conference. Oklahoma won that game. I don't know. I think Texas, to me, has the most room to flop of the three. Alabama, yeah, sure, new coach. Kalen DeBoer's won a lot of regular season games. Nick Saban's got the field. He's going to be around. I think Kalen DeBoer's staff, he hired really well. I think Bama is going to be ultimately fine. I'm not really worried about Bama flopping with Kalen DeBoer and everything. I think their floor is probably 9-3 this year.
But it could be a matter of, they won a lot of one-score games the last couple of years, and they've got the best coach in the history of the sport. And when you don't have the best coach in the history of the sport, maybe you lose some of those one-score games. And they're a really good team that's winning 8-9 games because they just can't get over that hump or something. There's definitely a reason.
Think about the game at Michigan, right? In their second week. You drop that one if you're Texas, suddenly you have to run the gauntlet in the SEC maybe to feel good and feel secure making the playoff, right? You might you kind of sneaky, you kind of really need that, huh?
Because it's a non-conference loss.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying that it's just pressure. If you lose, it's not a bad loss to lose at Michigan, but then you're already behind the 8 ball going into the conference play, and then you still go to Oklahoma. You still have the Oklahoma game, neutral site. You open with Mississippi State at home. That's good, but in Dallas against Oklahoma and Georgia back to back, I think you're splitting that. And then who knows, at A&M for the rivalry game at the end of the year, where the CFP might be on the line for them, that like the Texas A&M game might decide whether or not Texas makes the CFP. I mean, and that's on the road in College Station. So I don't know. Texas to me has the most flop potential of the three. I think Georgia's the safest. I think I'm buying back in on Bama a little bit here before the regular season. And I think Texas is the most volatile, or I could see Texas winning the SEC. And I could also see Texas finishing like 5th in their debut season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I was thinking this watching SEC Media Days, because like if we got a dose, if we got even like a 10% of what the Big 12 has dealt with the last however 25 years, 30 years, with Texas being in their conference, I can understand why those people hate Texas, because it is, when they said they were going to be everybody's Super Bowl, I kind of like, it's kind of an eye roll was my first, reaction. Like, it's the SEC. Like, you guys don't even understand week in, week out how many big games there are. But then I started thinking, like, it actually might be the Super Bowl with how much they've talked. It might be that game that everybody circled. And is Texas ready to be that team that everybody circles on the schedule? Like Alabama and Nick Saban, like they've proven for years that they could be that game. And Kirby Smart with Georgia, like they've proven they can be the team that's the hunted. Obviously, Kirby's going to say they're always the hunters, right? But they've proven that they can be that team with the bullseye and still walk into your place, take your best shot, and walk out with a win. I'm not sure Texas is necessarily ready for that bullseye. Like in terms of teams, like, yeah, last year's team, I'm sure they were just as good as Georgia. And maybe this year's team is just as good as Georgia. I don't know that they're the program that Georgia is to this point of what you can just expect year in and year out. And that's where the SEC is just different. Like, I think it's kind of crazy where we are right now with how Oklahoma has just dominated that conference for the last 20 years. And we're going the first year these two teams are in the SEC, and talking about Texas could win the SEC. It's just kind of crazy where these two programs have gone in a couple years. But I look at Texas and what they could be this year, and like they had some close games with TCU. Was it TCU they went to overtime with last year? Like there's just year in and year out, they have some close games. And obviously the Big 12 is a competitive conference, and they've definitely, ramped up the level of their recruiting the last few years. But it's a different beast in the SEC. And I didn't even realize until you said that Oklahoma and Georgia back to back on the schedule. Like that's something that they've never had to deal with. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a history of like Texas having like a letdown game after that Oklahoma game, because there is so much like just emotion that goes into that rivalry. I'll have to look into that though.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% on that.
Well, Matt Green, it'll be interesting. I mean, by and large, the SEC media picks, to put a bow on it, Vanderbilt obviously last. I will throw I'm going to say that because we're going to talk about the main characters and all that stuff here. So I'll save that because it's going to come up in this portion. So the theme of tonight's show here, Matt Green, SEC main characters, the West Side, formerly the West Division here, no longer with Oklahoma. We're throwing in here. We threw Texas in the East a few weeks ago when we did the Eastern portion of the Southeastern Conference. As our preview rolls along here, Matt Green, and the main character series continues on. So tonight, let's kick things off with the Alabama Crimson Tide here. Your main character for the 2024 football season for...
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.